Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
Welcome back to GovCon Unscripted, everyone. And today we are flipping the script. Normally, Chelsea Roberts is the one asking the questions, but today she's agreed to be a guest on her own show. I'm Melinda Milheim, and I'm honored to be your host for this special episode of GovCon Unscripted, as we learn more about one of the most fascinating women in GovCon. As you probably know, Chelsea is the CEO of Collaborative Compositions. She is a federal contracting SME, a small business advocate, and has most recently been named a 2026 Orange Slice's Engaged Defense Innovation 150 honoree. She's built a career helping companies of every size, from startups to established firms. She's cut through the red tape and actually helps them win in the federal marketplace. What makes her story even more interesting, though, is that government contracting has always been in her DNA. She grew up in a family business that became a major player in the GovCon space. She's since carved her own path, helping countless businesses navigate capture strategy, craft winning proposals, and deal with everything that comes with contract management. So we're going to talk about all of that today: her career, her passion for small business advocacy, her podcasting journey, and even what's next for her at big industry events. So anyone who listens regularly knows that this show is truly unscripted, except for one thing: the opening question. Chelsea always begins the podcast the same way, by asking her guests this question. So, in the spirit of tradition, Chelsea, please tell us who you are and what do you do?
Thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. I'm really excited to be flipping the script today on our show and looking forward to this conversation. So I am Chelsea Roberts. I am a podcast host, a published author, and most fervently an advocate for small businesses in the federal contracting realm. And what I do is I use my voice, my knowledge, and my experience to help small and mid-sized businesses navigate the complex waters of federal bureaucracy and get to the point where they are growing and sustaining that growth in a comfortable way that works for them. So I do all things business development and ultimately contract management, and have also been working with some government agencies here recently. So I'm helping from the other side of the fence as well, which has been a great experience.
Love that. So all of us who have been fans, who have been watching, just let us know, how is it being on the other side? You're normally on this side of the microphone. Now you're getting questions. What's it like?
Oh, I guess I feel put on the spot a little bit because the whole thing's unscripted and I don't know what's coming next, but neither do you. And it gives you the opportunity to think through some more critical questions and the opportunity for me to give folks a little bit of my story and shed some light on what I do and how I do it.
I love that. I love that you're giving us the opportunity to do this. I have to say, the first time that you and I spoke, it's been a little bit ago now, you started telling me a story about how you got into GovCon. You talked about your family business and that background, and I found it so spellbinding. We were supposed to have a very short meeting, and the meeting went like double, triple time because I just kept asking questions. It was so fascinating. So would you be willing to share some of this with the audience? Tell them how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a non-traditional journey that I've taken that's landed me into the group and industry that I am today within government contracting. But it really comes down to growing up in it. So I have parents who worked for collectively Raytheon, Northrop, and Lockheed, and they ultimately have a long history of government contracting with the big primes themselves. And at some point, they both decided that they were sick of moving and over the bureaucracy that they were experiencing in their own roles and decided that it was time for them to break off and go on their own. And the way that they did that was by starting a small business in my house when I was about 8 years old. And it was all history from there. They started in the upstairs and they had desks, they hired the neighbors, they had some admin folks come in from basically around the neighborhood. And I distinctly recall the time when I would walk upstairs in my pajamas, yet at 8 years old, and the kitchen was upstairs, of course. So I was just going upstairs to eat breakfast or get some cereal. And I remember the day my mom looked at me and said, "You need to go downstairs and you need to put office clothes on because jammies really aren't office attire. And this is an office now." So they took it real seriously from day one and had me just participating as much as I could. So it was an interesting start, I would say, for sure.
That's amazing. So you were around these conversations, you were picking all this stuff up as a kid even.
Yeah, I remember all of my friends at school would always look at me funny because I was using acronyms for full sentences and speaking in terms that just really didn't make any sense to them. And I was just like, this is normal language. What do you mean you don't speak in acronyms? You aren't sure what a Mac IDIQ is? You're not familiar with GWAX? Oh, okay. We're going to have to figure out different ways to engage with my peers at this age. But yeah, it was inherently learned and picked up from all of the conversations that were being had in my living room, in my dad's office, which was at one point a bedroom, and all of the other rooms in the house. It was just constant conversations about contracting and government acquisitions and the whole ecosystem that goes into building a small government contracting business, from business development to finance to contracts to basically all of the program and project management things that went into it. And it's funny, it was actually, they had an ocean engineering business. And so I got a whole lesson in engineering basically anytime I had a conversation with my dad. And I just felt so immersed in this total landscape of things that I never saw myself going into. I actually believed that being an engineer meant that you had to wear the uniform of khaki pants and a blue shirt every day. And I couldn't make that commitment at 8. I was just not ready to go into that whole business line because I was so certain that I couldn't wear the uniform. So it was definitely exposure therapy, we'll call it that.
I love it. I love it. The thing is, so often it's these problem solving things that people see, the challenges that businesses encounter, the how they fixed it, the lessons learned, the best practices that make somebody really good at their job. And here you were at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
Yeah.
being exposed to this all the time. And even if you weren't necessarily focusing on it because you didn't like that uniform and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not for me,
Yeah.
you're going to be absorbing this
Yeah.
even as a kid. So at what point did it switch for you where you went from this isn't for me to maybe this is the path I want to go down?
Yeah, honestly, I was pretty resistant to it for quite a while. And I think it was the cognitive bias of not wanting to wear the engineering uniform that played a
Mhm.
part in that. But I wanted to strike it out on my own. I wanted to go in a different direction. And I have a passion still to this day for all things within the biotechnology field and within biotech and biotech research and development. And so I went and decided that I was going to go get an undergraduate in health and life sciences with the goal of going into some genetic research and doing some genetic studies for just heritable genetic diseases. And I absolutely loved all of the classes, all of the courses, all of the experience that I got in going through my undergraduate degree and focusing on that in high school as well. And then I really realized that as soon as I was put into an undergraduate research position towards the end of my undergraduate career, I had the amazing experience of working for a group called the Collagen Diagnostic Lab, which is a University of Washington Medical Center organization that does loads and loads of genetic research on heritable diseases. And I loved that experience a lot too. I really enjoyed that. But when it came time to somewhere a little bit after the end of one of the quarters, it was revealed to me that the funding had run out, that there was no more funding for the research that I was going to be participating in, that I was doing, and that I basically was told good luck on trying to find funding for other research initiatives. Everybody's already got them covered, and it's a very closed off ecosystem when you're trying to fight for funding in that regard, and especially within the academic health research world. So I really realized that, and I did love the work, I loved the research, but it was also very isolating in that world because it was just very much being kept in a cubicle in a medical research building that is very old and not necessarily quite the systems and the building and the facilities had not been modernized in quite some time. I just realized that I don't think that I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing that specific type of work. And it occurred to me, this might not be what I was meant to do. This might not be where the road that I was meant to head down. And so I ended up at this sort of decision point where if I was no longer going to go down the genetic research path with my personal career, I needed to look and figure out what I was going to do. It was just the point where, yeah, okay, you need to get a paying job now and make your own way. And the university bookstore, which I worked at as well, was great experience, but I think that's probably also not where I could spend the rest of my life. And so I really took a bit of time for some self-reflection, probably a month or two, and really took some hard looks at what I knew I wanted to know more about and how I wanted to put my knowledge about that sort of area to use. And it came down to the fact that I was still able to speak in acronyms. I was still heavily involved with my parents' company and being a core provider in that role of being able to provide PM services, provide business development, provide some management support. Basically, across the board, I was trying to keep this company in a great position within the contracting realm. And my parents, all the while, are getting older and getting to the point where they needed the opportunity to retire. So I just put it into my brain that wouldn't it be a fun challenge to figure out how to get them to at least the point where they can retire and give them that opportunity. And that's really what kind of started the whole trip down this other path that I took after the pivot was the opportunity to give my parents the chance to retire and then see if I could leverage that experience, however I got it, whatever it was, into something that I could potentially do within a career path or on a career field. And so that long story short, I really realized that the route that I was going down was not going to be the one that I could continue to stay down. And it wasn't going to make me happy. I wasn't going to find joy in the work that I was doing. And I really found an opportunity to bring that spark back and get that joy back when I did take the opportunity to figure out how to get my parents to retire, which ultimately was selling their company for them.
Wow. What an amazing story. And like you said, completely untraditional path into
Yeah.
government contracting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you've built this incredible career on helping companies find, win, manage federal contracts.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest patterns or challenges that you see small businesses and mid-sized businesses running into when they're first doing this, when they're entering the federal marketplace, or even if they've been going for a while and they just kind of hit that roadblock? What are you seeing out there?
It's been this year, it especially has been quite the whirlwind of business and seeing businesses in flux. A lot of things that I've seen just over the career that I've had and built, especially within the past 5 years of having the company, are things like companies coming in with what I like to call shiny object syndrome. And they start out with something that is a strategy-ish. It's got some aspects of some cohesive strategy to it, but they almost all end up getting into a position where they're spreading themselves pretty thin in trying to pursue things that are not necessarily in their wheelhouse, that aren't necessarily aligned with what they want to do, that aren't really where they should be aiming and focusing their energy and time and efforts, but they think I'm going to miss out and they don't want to have that FOMO experience where they've got this fear of missing out on the next best thing because it looks like it could be somewhat well aligned with what they do. So they end up doing the old spray and pray method of just get it out there and see if we can win anything everywhere all the time. And the companies that are most successful are the ones that are really focused on delivering value where they can and where they know that they will be able to deliver that value. And they make sure that they trench those paths pretty completely before trying to go out and spread into other areas and other business lines and lines of effort. And it's hard. It's really hard within government contracting to stay with the path that was going to ultimately end up with some benefit and reward at the end, because there's all these things that'll pop up on sam.gov and you'll see this is great. That opportunity looks like it could totally be for us. It's got a 3-day turnaround, but it's really pretty much what we do. So it's a lot of, it's a lot of strategy drift that I see.
I love it. I love these terms. What did you say? Shiny object syndrome and strategy drift. I think those are two that need to be part of the GovCon dictionary from here on out.
Yeah.
It is fascinating though. So that is one of the biggest mistakes, challenges that you see for the companies.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so then as you go into a company as a consultant, what's your approach to building or rebuilding their business development strategy? Do you have a framework you work within, or is it like you really look at the company and you figure out where they are? What can you share with us?
A little bit of both. So I definitely have a framework that I work within. I colloquially refer to it as the position, pursue, and optimize approach, which kind of starts out with the same with everybody. And everybody doesn't necessarily really want to think that they start in the same place, but everybody needs to make sure that they understand who they're pursuing in terms of agencies and offices within those agencies and why. And they need to have the data behind those decisions, those pursuit decisions to drive that effort. So it's not just a conversation, which I come into all too often, by the way, of folks saying, which agencies are you pursuing? And they'll say, I've got DHS, HHS, DOD, all of DOD, VA, and we're also looking at FTC, by the way. And it's, oh, okay, that's fantastic. That sounds like it's a lot of effort and a lot of work to try to track and figure out all of those different agency priorities, all of those different agency budgets, all of those agencies' mission sets and strategies, especially if you don't have any sort of indication with data behind it that says, this agency actually buys what I'm providing, whether it's a solution or a software, a hardware, a service, or whatever. It is ultimately the best way forward for all of these companies to understand who is buying what they sell and then to march forward on the same path. So we do a lot of market research to start out all of our engagements to make sure that everybody's on the same page going forward and we don't end up going in many different directions at the will of one.
I love that. The idea that the market research is as important as anything else, maybe
Yeah.
more important than anything else, and that
Mhm.
targeted approach, because just on so many levels, that's brilliant. That is the way to go. And it is surprising how many don't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but I'm still going to ask this anyway, in case there's something else you want to add to this. But if you were going to give one piece of advice to a small to mid-size business doing government contracting, what would you say to them? Would you focus on that targeted approach thing, or is there something else you would add to that?
Yeah, I think so. I would definitely say make sure that you've got data driving your initiatives and that your pursuits so that there's a little bit of information behind any given direction that you're pursuing or heading into. But I would also say make sure that you're speaking the customer's language and you're talking in terms of value. Oftentimes I see it, and it just happens over time. I think part of that strategy drift aspect is that companies come in thinking that they are describing the value that they provide really well, very clearly. And then you put them on the spot and you ask them, hey, what is it that you do? And they start out with, I'm a woman owned small business. I do this, that, and the other for X, Y, or Z. And they include that second part, but it almost always starts out with some sort of designation or some sort of status claim of what they are, not what they do, and the value they provide. So I think it's very key to go back and make sure that everything that you're communicating or utilizing to communicate your value on behalf of your company is doing just that. It's communicating the value that you're bringing to the conversation. And it's not just putting up a flashy banner saying we're a woman owned or we're a SDVOSB or we're an 8A and we have 36 years of experience doing X, Y, or Z, because it really doesn't lead and it doesn't guide the person that you're talking to, customer, partner, or otherwise, into understanding what it is that you can do for them and why you should be able to do that for them.
Fascinating. I've seen a lot of different business podcasts and different business articles talking about that recently. And I suppose it's not a new concept. The idea that when you're talking to the customer, what problem are you going to fix for them? And
Yes.
I love how you put all of that. It's just absolutely genius. And, it sounds like what you're saying is when you come in, you can help a company kind of tailor that, right? Is that one of the first things that you end up doing? You do that market
Yeah,
research.
yeah. So we really get a good understanding for who the agencies are that we should be targeting. And then we help them with basically a whole gap analysis on things that they've already got that they're providing, or like marketing assets and website and the whole sort of branding aspect of it, and get a good sense for how they're conveying themselves in the market currently. And then we help them craft some materials that are really specifically tailored to those specific agencies, and in some cases specific primes that we're going after, to make sure that they can really convey the value that they can bring to the table in a language that really resonates with that customer set. And it really helps that customer understand what it is that they can do to help solve some of the problems that they're encountering, and how that aligns with that customer's mission set, which I think is a big help, and it's a differentiator for us. We like to make sure that everybody's speaking their customer's language and all aspects of their materials and all of the conversations that they have. So we like to make sure that we're providing them with a clear understanding of what's missing from what they currently have. We'll provide them some insights and even help them craft new assets where they don't have things that they might need, and capabilities briefings and one pagers and so forth. And we'll do that specifically tailored to the agencies that we're looking at and that we're going to pursue, so that it speaks to them in a way that stays with them.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So it sounds like your company really focuses on the business development side, on helping them figure out their market positioning, do the market research, know who their customers are. Now, what about contract management? You offer some
Yes.
of those services too, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's personally for me, one of my favorite areas to spend time on is in the contract management negotiation side, because I get to
Mm.
work between that company and the government oftentimes. So I'm oftentimes providing some liaison services between the company that I'm working with and their government customer. And the goal is always to come out with an agreement that is equitable for both sides, that brings value, that will be a benefit for both sides engaging. And so few companies have a true contract management sort of role or position within their companies. A lot of them just rely on PMs or management to provide that sort of overall contract management role and perspective in a lot of the conversations. And there's just a lot missing when you've got dual hat wearers in that contract management position, because all of the things that you need to take into consideration from a negotiation standpoint can be pain points, or they can be pressure points on both sides of the house. It might seem easier for a government customer to quickly award something with a short duration and sort of a small ceiling for award value. But in the reality of it, the pain of going through the contracting process on the government side, getting all the forms signed, getting all of the approvals, getting all of the agreements on their side of the house, can be somewhat burdensome and bureaucratic process to go through for them. So when it makes sense, we like to make sure that there's an increased ceiling and an increased award value and an increased period of performance that the companies are able to provide on, because it prevents anybody from having to come back to the table and do all of that contracting action over again in any short period of time. Because we recognize that they've gone to the trouble of developing that contract and getting those funds set aside, and they ultimately don't want to have to come back to the table and renegotiate and do a whole nother contract if they want to continue to buy from these companies. So it's oftentimes an interesting line to walk, and especially trying to find the wins for both sides, so that the company feels like they've gotten a benefit and that they're in a good position to maintain a long-term, high lifetime value relationship with their government customer, but also on the government customer side, that they feel like they're getting the best value out of their contract, and that they have procured something that will provide them with the value that they're looking for.
That's absolute genius. Think about the return on investment as a contractor.
Yeah.
If I'm coming to you and you are able to help me navigate through this and end up with a longer period of performance, you've more than paid for yourself. It's an
Yeah.
amazing thing,
Yeah.
to be able to add that kind of value. So how would a company know if they're in the right spot to engage your services?
Sure. And I'll be honest upfront about that. I oftentimes find myself referring companies back to the fantastic resources that you might find at Apex Accelerator, formerly a Procurement Technical Assistance Center, the free resources that you can get from SCORE and the SBDCs in your area. Those are all fantastic. And there is definitely a time and a place for leveraging those and making sure that you're not spending money where you really don't need to in your growth journey in government contracting. But for those companies who have already gotten their feet wet, who have either gotten a contract or have gotten into a position where they're having regular customer conversations with their government customers that are just trying to figure out how to get onto contract or what the right kind of contract for them to get onto is, those are the folks that I find that I engage with most successfully. They've got either that or they've got some really strong line of commercial business that they see a definitive need for within the government realm, and they just need some support in that relationship development, and they need that sort of opportunity to get a fresh perspective on different avenues for their ability to grow. And oftentimes it's not startups, it's not the companies that are fresh, brand new, just in existing, because to be honest, it takes a little bit of runway to get into government contracting. You have to have a little bit of time to be able to put in the effort to build the relationships and to figure out the right contracting mechanisms and to get involved with and included on those contracting mechanisms to be able to get that initial success and to get that initial traction. So we find that we are most helpful to companies that have already gotten that little bit of traction in the government contracting realm and are just looking to move and grow themselves to the next step of maturity for their business stage.
That's amazing. It's amazing that you're offering that resource because for the right company, this could be a game changer. It could take them from being stalled to getting to that
Yeah,
next level. That's
absolutely.
that's really amazing that you're able to offer that and to help them with that. Another question for you is this. What if you have listeners out there who maybe they haven't done government contracting yet? Maybe it's on their radar. So they're listening to this and learning more about it, but they're presently doing commercial contracts. Are you able to help with that type of thing as well?
Absolutely. There's something that we call federalizing
Mhm.
past performance and past experience. And for those companies that have had some successful commercial contracts, oftentimes you can essentially federalize that experience and translate it into a government speak or a government language that resonates with the government customer. So it really can be viewed as if you've helped an organization that had a business critical problem to overcome that problem, to solve that challenge, then you can probably translate that into an agency that has a similar size, a similar problem, and just needs to hear how you've done it for others in the commercial world in a language that they understand that resonates with them. So that's absolutely something that we can help with, and we can help companies translate what they've done in the commercial realm into federal experience and to be able to leverage that in terms of conversation topics coming to the table from a more educated standpoint with customers. Absolutely.
That's brilliant. So if there's someone out there who's perhaps thinking about this and they want to get hold of you, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn almost all the time. I publish just about daily. We get the podcast out there, and I do a lot of thought leadership and writing on topics that are interesting to me and close to my heart. So I'm definitely on LinkedIn. Chelsea Roberts, my maiden name used to be Megat, so it's still there, but Chelsea Roberts on LinkedIn. And you can reach out via my website, which is collaborativecompositions.com. And if you feel so inclined, go check out the book. It's on Amazon. It's called Hey GovCon, Get Help. And it's really for those folks that are in a position where they feel like they might need just a little bit of help to get to the next step, wherever they're at in their GovCon journey.
Love your title. Hey, GovCon, get help. It's a great title. So what prompted you to write the book?
Yeah, it was a mix of things. And I'm a co author with my friend and colleague, David Neal, who's also a government contracting expert. And we really thought that there is a stigma that comes with asking for help in any industry. And especially, I feel like personally for women, it's even harder for us to come to the table and say, hey, I need help with something, or I need a little bit of guidance, a little assistance on X, Y, or Z. And it came down to the fact that getting over that bias and that stigma, your cognitive bias of asking for help or just trying to stick it out, and then having the resources that are there to help you are two of the biggest hurdles that business owners and BD professionals and people in general in their career life have to overcome. And so it was a collective decision that there is not enough resources out there. There are not enough resources out there for those that really need the help. And there's not anybody saying it's okay to ask for that help. So we wanted to take the opportunity in written format to say, hey, everybody needs help once in a while. We all need that guidance, the assistance at some point in our lives. And it's absolutely okay for you to ask for it, for one. And for two, here's some resources and information for when you do.
You are so great at educating the GovCon community. So obviously you have this fantastic podcast. You're putting great content out on LinkedIn. You wrote that book. I understand you also did a webinar recently.
Yeah, I did. So I always love to collaborate with my friends and colleagues in the industry. We all recognize each other's strengths and talents, and we all bring something different and unique to the table when we come and we help businesses. So I ultimately was working with Judy Bratt, who is a great friend and a great colleague and a great voice in this industry as well, very experienced. And we put together a webinar that ultimately was discussing the plateaus that companies come into contact with and that they encounter throughout their business maturity progression and their life cycle. And I have come up with a framework that I call the 3R pivot framework. And it's a opportunity for companies to take a look at what they're currently doing, what led them to the need to pivot and to get them into a position where they can comfortably make some of those decisions to pivot from what they were doing into a new perspective and into a new position to be able to overcome that plateau that they've encountered. So it was a very successful webinar. We had, gosh, going on, I think about 100 registries that we got for it. So it was great. We had a great turnout. And I think everybody can find that webinar. Probably we'll put that in the show notes just for everybody's awareness. And if you are interested, and then ultimately you can find the resource that I put together, which is probably why everybody came. But it's a pivot past plateau toolkit that includes some checklists, some measuring tools, some self-assessment type things that you can leverage to really put yourself into a position to understand where your biggest gaps are, what your biggest challenges are, and then ultimately some solutions and some suggestions on ways to overcome those challenges. So we'll put that resource in the show notes for everybody else for who didn't get to see the webinar. We'll make sure that you get access to that resource as well.
That's amazing. What an amazing free resource to put out there. It's very generous of you. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people who didn't get to go live who would love to see a recap of that. So that'll be nice that you're putting that out too. Okay. So there's a question I've personally been dying to ask you. How did you get started with the podcast?
Yeah, so I've been public speaking since I was knee high to a grasshopper. My parents put me in 4-H, which is a community organization, I guess I would refer to it as, that has opportunities for people to practice public speaking and provide presentations. And I had enough people over the past couple of years say, you've got a great voice, you come across really well, you're very confident, you're articulate, you should think about starting a podcast. And I put it off for a long time. I really hesitated because personally, I do not like the sound of my own voice. Having to tune in and listen to myself talk is just about as painful as it gets. But I feel like there is value that can come out of it for others, and having the opportunity to provide other people with a platform to share their stories, whether positive, negative, challenges, successes, obstacles that have been overcome, lessons learned, and experience that they've garnered from all aspects of their lives and their careers. Everybody has something to share that is incredibly valuable to somebody else who's going through that same thing or is seeking out input or information on these topics that folks come and talk on. So I really feel like I'm doing myself a favor by giving other folks a platform to come and share their experience in government contracting. And that, I think, and I hope, brings value to not only our audience, but future listeners and folks that are just joining the industry to come and be able to hear those stories straight from the mouths that have lived them.
This is fantastic. It makes me think about your childhood. You're walking through to get a bowl of cereal and you're sitting there listening about the challenges they're facing and how they're tackling those challenges and what problem solving techniques are working best and
Yeah.
lessons learned and best practices. This is the modern day version of what you grew up with.
Yep.
That GovCon education that everyone can get, whether they're driving down the road or they're on the treadmill, maybe they're in the shower and they have it going. You can combine that with your everyday life and really benefit from the wisdom of everyone else. Okay, so you're doing a podcast. You've been doing it for a little while now. I have to ask you, have you had any surprises, anything that you didn't expect when you started podcasting?
Yeah, the whole production of a podcast is something that I was just barely aware of. And I walked into this very confident that I could do it all myself. And I have found that is not the way that I could go. And I ultimately am fortunate enough to have a fantastic assistant and podcast manager who does all of our post production editing and gets all of the episodes shaped and shined into a point where everybody sounds good and looks good on camera. So I definitely was surprised at the work that it takes on the back end to be able to get everything into a publishable position. So that was definitely one surprise. And then I think I probably have a surprise in every episode because I think somebody will say something that just catches me off guard, or it's just a little bit of exactly what I would have expected to come from them in every episode. So I love that I keep things unscripted and fresh for folks to share their perspective because you'll always hear something that you weren't necessarily expecting.
That's actually a really great approach. And I was going to ask you, why did you go with unscripted? Because some podcasts are truly scripted.
Very scripted, yeah.
Did you think about which way to go? Did it just like, how did you come up with this idea?
I have a mentor who I respect very much, Mark Amtower. I'll shout him out by name. And he's got a radio show or a podcast that he does for Federal News Network. And his is very conversational. And I feel like having scripted discussions can be valuable when you're trying to elicit specific points and when you really have a point that you're trying to drive home with the conversation. But I found that it tends to be easier to listen to. It's a little bit more relaxed and it feels a little bit more natural when you're just having a conversation between friends. And it comes out to be a little less formal and rigid from my perspective, at least. But I listen to the gambit. I listen to folks that are scripted and the same questions or very scripted conversations. I listen to long form podcasts and things like that. So I've definitely seen both sides of it, but I felt like I personally am probably much better at having things unscripted because I get to have some just genuine conversations with folks that I might not have gotten to otherwise.
Well, what a cool idea. I wish more would do that.
Yeah,
Because you do have kind of those twists and turns that makes it really worth listening to every episode because you never know where it's going to go. I think,
absolutely.
yeah, makes it fun as an audience member. That's why I'm one of your biggest fans,
Oh,
I will
thank
say.
you.
Okay, I have a couple questions that I wrote down, but you don't know are coming. Okay,
Yeah.
so if you would indulge me, if you could describe GovCon in one word on a good day and in one word on a bad day, what words would you pick? What would be your good day word? What would be your bad day word?
My good day word would probably be predictable. And the reason I chose that word is because you, in so rarely these days, get the opportunity to accurately forecast and read the tea leaves into something that can be lucrative for your career and producing funding and so forth. And in government contracting, you, on a good day, have the opportunity to basically predict the future of your company's revenues because you've got the opportunity to go through and have all of the market research and all of the forecasting and all of the recompete data and everything that you could potentially need to understand where the opportunity is and what you need to do to pursue it. So having the predictability in that respect within this industry can be incredibly valuable. On a bad day, I would probably say, gosh, soul crushing. So it's still one word. Yeah,
Sounds
I
right.
think, yeah, yeah. And it is, it can be just absolutely devastating to have a contract canceled or terminated, or to have your government points of contact all be laid off or terminated. It really can put you into a pessimistic position on some of those bad days. But I think fortunately, at least for me and for the folks that I work with, we try to keep that eternal optimism because it will become predictable again and you will be able to put yourself into that position to succeed. So I try to make sure it's not too bad too long.
Okay, good answer. Yes, soul crushing. That's a great answer. And so, what about this? What's something that people might be surprised to learn about you outside of GovCon? Something that people don't typically know about you.
I am not an engineer, but I have played one on TV. And what I mean by that is that I've given a lot of talks and presentations on engineering dense and engineering heavy topics to conferences in throughout the past. So I've spoken on engineering services for expeditionary warfare. I've talked about the need for standards in subsea seabed warfare. And I've actually done some invention work and some ideation myself from an engineered services and from an engineered products perspective, that I think that technical depth and knowledge gives me the edge over folks that are a little less technical and take a little bit longer to understand some of the things that the companies that I work with are doing, for instance. It's very easy for me to interpret and understand very technical concepts that most folks, I think, if they pick up on it, they take a little bit longer to really get comfortable walking and talking in those worlds.
That's amazing. Okay, talk about surprises. I never thought that's what you would say. I didn't know what you would say, but I would have never guessed that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Does some of that go back to your background with your parents and growing up in this industry and all of that?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Having dad come to my classes in school and give talks on subsea cables and the fact that the internet goes through cables underwater and not through the sky on the telephone poles and doesn't go through satellites and stuff like that. It was very much a constant deep dive into everything engineering from his perspective. So it was dinner table conversations, it was conversations on the ride to school. It was basically every time that I had a conversation with my dad, it was something technical. And that very much put into my mindset and into the way that I think very technical aspects of considering things. So it gave me, I think, like I said, a bit of an edge when it comes to being able to immerse myself in some new technical concepts.
That's amazing. So between that background, your educational background, so you have what, undergrad and health and life science, then you went on and got an MBA on
Yep.
top of that.
Yep.
And then you've worked with so many businesses and so many industries. And correct me, I'm probably leaving some out, but I know you've dealt with what, like healthcare related industries with VA related kind of contracts, things like that. You've dealt with tech, you've dealt with defense. I know I'm leaving out a bunch. So, like, what type of industries have you worked in with clients at this point?
Yeah, there's a picture that is in many halls of many government offices, and specifically within Department of Defense, Department of War now, offices and facilities that reflects an interesting landscape. And it's got sensors on the bottom of the ocean floor, things that are bobbing up and down in the water in the middle of the water column that are connected to those sensors, things that float on top of the water that provide that data, that information, and then things that are all connected to things that are on land that are tanks and trucks and munitions and all things that are connected to in things that are in the sky. So airplanes, aircraft, other types of drones and things like that. And then other things that are connected all to that entire landscape that are also in space. It's called the Sea Counter JADC2 picture, which is, or it's JADC2 and now Counter JADC2. It's evolved over the years, but it basically demonstrates a very interconnected warfighting landscape, and it includes all of the different sort of verticals that you might include in that, which undersea, on top of the water, on land, and sky and space. And I think I'm at the point where I can comfortably say that I've worked in every one of those different areas with companies that I've worked with that do things underwater, on the seafloor, things in space and sky, and on land, just the same. And services and solutions and providing hardware, software, you name it. I've really worked with companies that do a variety of things. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons I love my job, is because it's just, I get a ton of variety and diversity in the companies that I get to work with.
How amazing. And with every project you do, with every contract you help people, with every company you go into, your knowledge base and your skill base only grows
Yeah.
because every time you learn about a new aspect of something or you tackle a new challenge, so you're just getting better and better at this.
Yeah,
That's
I'd like to
amazing.
think so. Yeah, I'd like to think
Yeah.
so.
How absolutely amazing. Let me see. One other question I have for you. And I struggled on whether to ask you this or not because it puts you on the spot. But I have to tell you, I want to know, and I think everybody listening would like to know this. So your podcast, as we've talked about, is unscripted. It's
Yep.
unscripted. I can tell you because I came on as a guest. We don't know what you're going to ask. You
Yeah.
you don't tell us. You don't cover it at all. Like it is truly unscripted.
Yeah.
We know that one opening question will be asked, who are you and what do you do? But beyond that, anything goes. So, since that is how your podcast is, have you had true surprises? Like, what's the most delightfully unpredictable thing? Can you tell us the most unpredictable thing or the most unpredictable guest? Something has happened during recording.
Oh man, everything is always a surprise, which I love. And that's definitely one of the advantages of having the podcast unscripted. But I think some of the most golden pieces of information have come out from some of the guests that I've had that are transitioning service members, for instance, and that have found some amazing success in an industry that has nothing to do with government and is not at all related to government contracting. I had a guest just recently who came out of service with the military and they still feel very connected because they're still active in the reserves, but they are ultimately making their way as a financial advisor. And they love the predictability. They love that they can help people predict how they can retire in 10, 15, 20, 40 years. And they love that being able to serve the everyday American in that unique way that it brings them back. They're able to tie that experience back to what they did in the service or in the military. And I think I find that so inspiring and so incredibly motivational that there are folks out there that have taken that experience and leveraged it in their way that makes the best sense for them. And they don't feel like they have to go the traditional route of working for another big contractor or going the retirement route. They feel like that they have a different path where they're serving just as important of a mission.
That's a great answer. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So, do you find yourself leaving the podcasts with your perspectives changed?
Most
Did,
times,
yeah,
yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're hearing all these interesting stories and experiences people have had and challenges that they've faced and how they overcame them and things. I can't help but imagine that you walk away being very moved by some of the stories, being fascinated by some of the stories, find yourself thinking about them later when you drive down the road.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I definitely do. And it's brought a new thought to my mind in every different conversation. I always love getting different perspectives because it helps me build mine and shape mine and a little bit more effectively. Driving down the road, I'm listening to music on the radio, and I think back to the guest that I had who has made his way as a DJ and is ultimately having the time of his life being a creative DJ for folks. And he's doing great. He's thriving and has a growing business with that. So I just love that there are so many different stories that everybody has some sort of connection to in one way or another, but they can all find some value in the discussions that we have and the stories that are told here.
wow. So if somebody wants to be a guest on your podcast, how would they go about doing so? Should they reach out to you
Yeah.
directly?
Yeah, definitely. So either reach out to me directly or you can reach out to our podcast email, which is govconunscripted@gmail.com. And our podcast manager, Angie, she'll get right back to you. And she's fantastic at getting guests scheduled and making sure that everybody's comfortable with each other. We get an introductory call going, and sometimes they last 2, 3 times as long as they might because we realize the conversation that we're going to have on the podcast is just going to be just that interesting. So
Yeah.
definitely reach out on LinkedIn, the website, just by the email, govconunscripted@gmail.com.
And it sounds like you're not looking just for people who have GovCon companies, but you talked
Yeah.
about the people who left government service, who've left military, who became financial advisors, DJs, other interesting stories that are still related to government and government service in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had folks on that are like involved with their local 911 center that they ultimately have some sort of tied to state and local sort of contracting. I've talked to folks that provide resources. So I am now recently a government contractor, but ultimately there's resourcing folks out there that have never actually been a government contractor themselves, and they ultimately are providing resources, information, knowledge, and support to those government contractors who need it. So I've got all of those resource providers are always welcome on the call to share some wisdom or some advice or hot takes that they have. And then I'm also looking for folks who are still in government that are comfortable having conversations with industry on things that matter to industry members, and that they ultimately would like to share whatever's going on in their lives within their agency, within their specific department or group. So I'm definitely always looking for diverse and varied show schedule listing and making sure that we get some unique voices on.
Well, that's fantastic. And you talk about people who are still doing government service, still in the military, and you talk about the human aspect, but you also talked about them being comfortable sharing interesting ideas of, hey, look, if you're working in the government, what do you wish contractors knew? What do we need you to do better? What do we need you to do differently? How could you better position yourself to give us what we need? Those
Absolutely.
kind of folks might be, if you're out there, might be good candidates for a future show. I have one final question for you. What's next? What's upcoming for the podcast, for your company, for you personally, for your career? What's next?
Yeah, so the podcast will keep going. We release weekly, and I like to make sure that we've got a good schedule of guests that are planned to come on. If there's anybody that listeners want to have on the show that would like they'd like to hear from, I always encourage folks to reach out and make suggestions for guests. And I ultimately, so with my company, I will continue to be a consultant and provide those services to the government contracting community. But I've also started something else recently. And I think I mentioned when we talked last that I'm a new mom. So I've got a little one who is 2.5 months old at this point, and I have found that in my very short time of being a new mom, there aren't a whole lot of resources and there isn't a whole lot of market attention paid to new parents and working parents in general. So I've started something new that I'll hard launch it here, and we'll get everybody the information and so forth on it as we go and make sure that we include that in the show notes. But I've called it Just to Start Kiddie Conferences. And what it is ultimately aimed to do is bring opportunity for working parents to come to conferences and events, specifically within the government contracting arena, and bring their kids and put them into a place or allow them to be overseen and provided for in an area within that conference that has things like age appropriate STEM activities, that has a pumping station. So women who are new moms have the opportunity to pump when they need to, and ultimately has opportunities for kids anywhere from ages 1 to 15, basically, to engage. And they can basically go to their own version of this conference. And like I said, age appropriate STEM related activities, opportunities to engage with other kids from around the country so they can start building their network early. It'll have crafts, toys, and ultimately an opportunity for the kids to have a fun show, as well as giving the parents an opportunity to go out and network and go out and rejoin the community without having to worry about the burden of leaving their kids behind, God forbid, or ultimately having to bring their kids and not have anything for them to do and have them tag around or have to leave early so that they can get back and provide for them. That, I think, is my next, that's where I'm spending a lot of time and energy right now, is in getting that organization established and getting some shows for 2026 on the schedule, at which we can have some kiddie conferences and we can start bringing the future government contracting workforce up at a very young age.
Oh, what a brilliant idea. Oh, and so the idea that it's not just something for the parents to look forward
Yeah.
to, but the kids will look forward to it, enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. I know that's something that I would have absolutely been interested in. I can think of so many people just off the top of my head who will absolutely take part in this.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that you came up with this. A genius idea. So you've heard it there, folks. This is the hard launch of kiddie conferences. This is going to change the game for parents everywhere.
I hope if I can feel more included and if I can help other working parents feel a little bit more included and get back into the rhythm of networking and engaging with other adults, I think I'm doing everybody a favor and a service.
Yes, you are. That's a great idea. Seriously, a great idea. Before we wrap up, I want to ask, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you think maybe we should cover?
Gosh, we might have to save it for the next episode and the next time we do this because you have been a fantastic host. So if this hasn't encouraged you to go out and start your own podcast, I don't know what will.
Oh, thank
But
you.
no, this has been a fantastic conversation. And I really appreciate you guiding and taking us through these ins and outs and twists and turns of my career. Some great questions. So definitely, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I guess I should wrap up by saying, Chelsea, thank you for letting us turn the tables on you today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to highlight your journey. You're always doing that for all of us and telling our stories and helping us tell our stories. But to get to highlight your story from your family's roots in GovCon to building collaborative compositions, hosting GovCon Unscripted, all of the writing you've done. We didn't even touch on the fact that you've written for Bloomberg Government yet. We'll save that for the next time around. And your new endeavor, Kitty Conferences, is going to be absolutely genius. And also, let's not forget being recognized among the top defense innovators with your newly announced award. So for listeners who want to learn more or want to work with Chelsea directly, want to be on the podcast, we have talked throughout the podcast about where you can reach out to Chelsea. Definitely reach out to her on LinkedIn. You can reach out to her through the show notes. There are details there where you can reach out to her as well. Chelsea, congratulations again on all of your well-deserved success. And thank you for everything you're doing to help small businesses, mid-sized businesses find their voice and their place in this market and give all of us something entertaining and educational to listen to as we're going about our day. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Melinda Milheim. That's Chelsea Roberts. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Melinda. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.